Well, it's currently a very fun time to be a Montreal Canadiens fan. Obviously, the playoff run that they went on is exciting. And when you look to the future, Eric Engels, there's lots to be excited about. It was a few days ago that we talked about the future of the Habs in the form of guys that are currently in the Montreal Canadiens uniform and have played NHL games. But let's take it a little bit further, and guys that we expect to see in a little bit. The NCAA, Cole Caufield, he's back playing games. Just, what have you seen from him? And I guess how excited should Habs fans be about this guy?
Yeah, before getting into the specifics on him, more than anything, the Canadiens are really excited that he's playing games. Long layoff since last spring. There was a lot of talk about potentially loaning him to a European club on the pro side with so much uncertainty about the NCAA starting in. Once the news came out just a little while back that his division would be going, he's back and ready, and Wisconsin had a lot of preparation going into the weekend. They played their first two games. They had a weak season last year. They won their first two games. Caufield had 2 assists in those 2 games, no goals, but right on the same path that he left off on. He was a point per game player last year, the highest producing rookie in the NCAA, and I think there's big things expected there. And Caufield met with some media members earlier this week, said that he's finding his game, that the layoff obviously has affected him just like anybody else. But obviously the time he spent at the World Junior Camp for the USA just a little while back here helped. So I think as we go along, and they've got games, Wisconsin does this week coming up Thursday and Friday, I think we're going to see him start filling the net.
Now, I know it's a strange time and there's a million moving parts because of COVID and because of the way the NHL is trying to get back up and running. But if you're a betting man, just when do we see Cole Caufield in a Montreal Canadiens uniform playing in the National Hockey League?
He's betting on himself and feeling that it's going to be by the end of this year. The Canadiens, in an ideal world, would love to see him progress to that point. But as Marc Bergevin, the GM of the Canadiens, always says, it's the players who make the decisions for you. And in a sense, he's got to perform to the ability that will allow him to get there. And I think in Caufield's circumstances, it's not really a rush. You're looking at a sophomore in university, a guy that, yes, he was drafted 15th overall and broke all those records of the National Development Program, impressive goal scorer. But the Canadiens have the luxury of taking their time with him, and they do because of the fact that they've added so much depth to their roster. Bringing in guys on the right side like Josh Anderson, Tyler Toffoli, who will be with the NHL club this year, makes it that much more that they don't have to rush with Cole Caufield. And I think Caufield knows that, and it's a motivation for him. So, if he ends up finishing this year with Wisconsin and is able to sign a pro deal and potentially play with the Laval Rocket in the AHL, or he blows it out of the water and proves that he's ready to join the Canadiens right away and they have to shift guys around and potentially move someone to the left side, it's all positive news for Montreal and certainly for Caufield.
So Eric, Cole Caufield, the big name in the NCAA if you're a Habs fan, that's the guy that we've talked about that you're paying attention to, you're watching closely, and you're kind of seeing where he might slot in the future. But if you're a Habs fan and you want to maybe keep an eye on another Habs prospect in the NCAA or a few other guys, what names are out there that they should do some research on and maybe watch some NCAA hockey?
Well, I would zero in on 3 in particular, and let's look at the 2 defensemen at Northeastern, Jordan Harris and Jaden Strobel. And I spoke to Northeastern's coach, Jim Madigan, about those 2 players. They've had a training camp going since September 19th. The Hockey East division of the NCAA just announced last week that they're starting up as of November 20th. That's great news for the Canadiens and their fans who want to see these players play. They were both at the USA World Junior Camp. Strobel, actually, he's a big, rangy defenseman, a lot of skill, a lot of raw talent. He had a major groin injury last year that limited his action. He actually re-aggravated it a bit at the World Junior Camp, but his coach, Jim Madigan, says that he'll be good to go when the season starts, and there's big things expected. He said that Jordan Harris has looked lights out since they started training camp. And what's interesting about training camps in the NCAA, and something Madigan was talking about, is just how many restrictions they've had and how they've had to phase their way into being a complete team. They were watching video from 3 separate rooms and patching it in through Zoom. They were skating in 2 separate groups. But now they're excited to get their season going, and these are 2 Habs prospects that down the line the Canadiens believe are going to turn into NHL players. Another guy that you have to look out for who's going to start a season in December with the University of Denver, Brett Stapley, a 7th-round pick of the Canadiens. And I asked Rob Ramage, who's a development guru for the Canadiens, one of 2 guys that runs their development department, about, which prospects have we not paid enough attention to? And that was the name that he came out with, Brett Stapley. And you look at the 7th round for the Canadiens, over the last few years. Caden Primo is a prime example of a guy who went in the 7th round and looks to have an NHL future and has already played NHL games. So, Trevor Timmins has done good work there. Jake Evans is another guy picked out of the 7th round, NCAA guy who played NHL games already and is expected to be the 4th-line center of the Canadiens. So some exciting news on those fronts.
Now, you can't speak about the future of the Montreal Canadiens without mentioning Jesperi Kotkaniemi. Now, he's progressed past the prospect phase. This is a guy that we've seen in action, and he's had his ups and downs already. There's still a lot to be excited about. He, much like the NCAA players, is back in action, getting some game action in. What have you seen from him back in his hometown in Finland?
Unfortunately, only the highlights. I'd love to be able to watch the full games. But, I think the Canadiens made a really smart decision putting Jesperi Kotkaniemi into action in an environment where he's comfortable with his hometown team, with Pori the Asat in Finland. And naturally, as a player this age needs to be playing games. So they put him in that situation. The first 3, he was getting his feet wet, getting used to playing what's admittedly a very different style of hockey, didn't have any points. And the last 4, he's got 3 assists and a goal. As we're taping this, maybe it'll come out a little later. He scored a goal today. Today is Wednesday. So, there's great promise in Kotkaniemi being able to play there, but also across Europe. The Lahti Pelicans in Finland, you've got Jesse Alonen, who just signed a 2nd-round pick from 2018, just signed a deal right when COVID hit to come to Montreal, came over, had to go back. He's playing, he's scoring some goals. That's great news. Matthias Norlinder is a prospect that many Canadiens fans, he's jumped up the ranks, this kid. He's actually the product of the Max Pacioretty deal for Nick Suzuki and Thomas Tatar. They got a 2nd-round pick that they ended up flipping, and they ended up drafting Norlinder with this pick. Extreme talent, left-handed guy who plays the right side. Suffered a minor injury recently. He's just rehabbing, coming back. Playing with Frölunda, getting his feet wet in that league, the Swedish league, which is one of the best leagues in the world. So it's good to see all these players are playing. There were so many concerns going back. You go back to May and then go through June and then go through the summer. Where are these young players going to play and how much of their time and development is being wasted by the situation that we find ourselves in? So the Canadiens have to be thrilled that these players are playing.
Well, Eric, as always, we appreciate your insight and we appreciate you taking the time to do this.
My pleasure, Shawn.